the Springboks' magnificent display in the Cape 2 weeks ago, this episode of Writer's Block will be based solely on dissecting and discussing that performance. Better late than never, I suppose. Joining me today is Daniel Goldberg, Leonard Solms, and Stephen Pettit. Gents, again, thanks for coming down, and we'll get straight into it. Dano, after all the criticism surrounding Alistair Coetzee in the build-up to that Newlands Test match, especially around things such as team selection, I thought that Coetzee really came up and proved his doubts wrong.
Well, I mean, a loss is a loss at the end of the day, but they also do say silence the critics. I mean, he proved that while we may not have been able to win at the end of the day, we certainly gave the All Blacks a run for their money. So I agree with you. He definitely did prove himself.
And obviously the Book Pack produced arguably their most abrasive physical performance since Coetzee took over at the helm. Dano, is that sort of conservative, forward-orientated approach the way to go for this Book side in the future?
Well, historically it has been. I mean, we know Springboks have always been known as a very physical side, but I feel like we need to work towards more of a blend. The backline was, just so to say, sloppy. They made a couple of errors. They weren't as vibrant as they have been this season. But I feel a blend of that and a bit of running is what we need for the future.
Well, Steve, Malcolm Marx produced what has been described as one of the great Test match performances by a hooker. Do you think that he can go on to emulate the likes of Bismarck du Plessis in the future?
I think what we saw on that Saturday was what Lions fans have been seeing for the last 2 years, and what we are seeing is the development of, in my opinion, probably going to be one of the greatest hookers, if he lives up to it, of all time almost. I think he's got the physical attributes of the likes of Bismarck. He's got that physicality. He plays a bit like that flank. He's got, I mean, we saw all the steals and everything. But what he also has, that I think Bismarck lacked, is he's got a head in his shoulders. He doesn't. You look at him. He's not one that gives you a lot of high tackles or stupid penalties and stuff like that. He's much more intelligent player. I think he's a more versatile player. I mean, if you watched Currie Cup over the weekend, he made a very good break and probably got a decent offload in the tackle. His skills are being a lot better than Bismarck. So I think everything that Bismarck has and a little bit more. And I think you've seen sort of performances at 23 years old at the moment. We've got at least another 2 World Cups, and I reckon he could be one of, if not the best hooker that we've ever seen in this country.
Oh, very exciting stuff. Obviously, the Book line-out again produced a much better display than what was on show in Albany. What other performances from that Book Pack really stood out for you? Where do you think they managed to perhaps one up the All Blacks?
Well, I think the front row stood up, especially Kitsoff obviously earning that first start and proving why he should have been given the chance earlier. I think Ruan Andreas still struggling. Gives away too many penalties for me to be playing international. Obviously, we've got a shortage in that area. Hopefully, we'll have Sakuni Ustas back. But I think the front row dominated the scrum. I mean, we won most of the scrum, which is good to see. And you need that front forward ball. Obviously, Evan Etzebeth finally putting out the sort of display that everybody had raving him now. He's been a bit quiet. He's always been very solid and doesn't do much wrong. But I think on Saturday 2 weeks ago, he displayed why he could be one of the best locks in the world. I thought Lou Dialga had a better game. I'm not sure if he justified his selection ahead of Franco Mostert, who's a workhorse and will give you whatever, all from minute 1 till minute 80. Sia Khaleesi again having a quiet game. I think he struggled since the injury to Jack Creel. I think not having Creel doing a lot of the hard jobs. I mean, Khaleesi hasn't had that sort of freedom that he had a while back. But yeah, I mean, you can't say much about Francois Lowe playing out of position in the 8th man and also not lasting too much. So I think the loose trio was a bit disappointing overall, but good to see Evan Etzebeth stepping up and obviously Kitsoff and also a phenomenal performance.
Sean, I have a question for you actually. Last time we had an episode, I spoke about how I didn't back the loose trio just because too many players out of position and too many things being changed. How do you think they played?
That loose trio?
Yeah.
Well, obviously Francois Lowe is not an 8th man. He was there short term to cover up. Peter Steff produced a much improved show blindside. I thought he really proved his critics wrong there and had a really big game. Like Stephen said, Sia Khaleesi has been a bit quieter since the injury to Creel. He hasn't been able to sort of sharpen those wider channels and sort of be a sort of freelance ball carrier, But
in general, it surprised me quite a lot because I was expecting some problems, but I felt Francois Lowe, first time playing internationally at 8th, he did very well there.
Most certainly his experience.
I mean, that's what it was at the end of the day. He was calm. He knew what he was doing no matter what. It's not like he was really playing 8th. He was more playing as a flank anyway. Just he had that 8 in his back.
It's going to be interesting to see if Coetzee selects Dan du Preez at the end of your tour to start at 8. Obviously, we've got a shortage there. Zia Khaleesi is back for the Boks for that tour. Steve, staying with the forwards, obviously Johan van Graan, it was announced last week that he'd taken up Rassie Erasmus's post at Munster as director of rugby. Considering the fact that he's been in this Boks setup for about 6 seasons now, How big a loss is he to the national side?
I think him leaving shows the widespread epidemic that we have. We'll not be able to keep our best players, our best forwards. I mean, not necessarily him leaving, but the fact that he's been released completely out of his contract just shows the sort of the European sides flexing their financial muscle. And the fact that we obviously can't compete is, first of all, very worrying. And I think over and above just for the fact that we've lost so many coach Mikes. Rassi was already over there. Jimmy Stonehouse over there. Now, recently, obviously, Ackerman leaving now as well. So I think short term, I've been trying to find out exactly what's happening because there's a lot of conflicting reports whether he's going to be at the bottom. Some people think he's going to be here for the end of the term. Munster's come out and said no, they want him to link up, which could also mean Rassi Rasmus might be returning. So I think short term, we still need to see exactly what's going to happen, but I think it's a big problem that we need to now, come January or February, when we sort of announce our coaching staff staying to the next World Cup, we need to make sure that all of them have contracts that are not going to be able, they're not going to be able to be competed with from a franchise. We don't have franchises that are competing financially with national contracts.
Absolutely.
So I think it's a problem. I mean, he's been there a long time, so it's a big loss, but I think at the same time, obviously, then a proud opportunity for some new blood and some new ideas within the box setup. So it's an opportunity and a loss at the same time, but I think just the scenario is one that's very worrying for Bok Rugby.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I suppose so. Well, we spoke about the forwards in that test match, absolutely superb, monumental. But touching on the backs, there were a few positions that I think a few South Africans are feeling a bit sceptical over. Stephen, I know you have a big opinion on this, but we'll go to Leon first. Leon, Elton Jantjies and Ross Cronje didn't have their best games in the 9 and 10 jersey.
It was an uncharacteristically sloppy performance from Ross Cronje. He had a part to play in 2 of those All Black tries. There was that poorly executed pass, that kick that went too far, ended up in Havili's hands, led to them coming back at us. I don't think we should hold it against him too much. He's generally very consistent, and he showed moments of brilliance even in that game, and scored a try of his own. Elton Jantjies I've got mixed feelings about, because perhaps he's lacking some big match temperament. Showed that again with this last display, but at the same time, he's criticized so persistently, and he still manages to produce most of the time. So he clearly does have some sort of resilience. It doesn't make sense to me that he doesn't deliver in the big games.
Well.
Yeah, every game's a big game for him.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, obviously he's under pressure because Andre Pollard came on and he produced quite a cameo. For me, it makes sense to go with players for that half-back pairing who know each other very well. Don't take that from me though. I mean, I've never played in either of those positions, but Justin Marshall said exactly the same thing.
Yes, absolutely.
So Cronje and Jantjies, yeah, that's still an ideal pairing for me. We still have to see how much Pollard can produce when he's match fit.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying Coetzee must just stick with these
Yes.
with his tried and tested combination, not experiment.
At the end of your tour is a good opportunity.
Yeah. But for now, I'm still content with what we have.
Absolutely, Steve.
I think, particularly with Jantjies, I think a lot of it speaks to the game plan, and Cronje as well. I was looking at some stats, and I think he kicked, so percentage-wise, he kicked almost double the percent he did in that one game than he did throughout the season at Lions. He, at a lot of time, and he was picked at the Lions this year because tactical decisions are a lot better than the likes of perhaps Clerk, who then obviously left. But I think what you saw is a performance where he did, a lot of time, I don't think he was doing what exactly you wanted to. I think it speaks to maybe the game plan to play. I think Jantjies suffers from the same sort of thing where he's a flyer that kicking has never been a strong suit. He's not a tactical kicker. And when you see him putting up pointers up and unders and kicking away possession, the first thing to do is say why you do it, but then you have to look at, is it what he wants to be doing? Is it what Coetzee wants to do? If Coetzee wants to play a tactical kicking game, then picking Jantjies is pointless.
Yeah.
It's like picking Warren Whiteley and saying, okay, I want you to bash over players and take us over the game. He's not that sort of player. So I think if he's going to continue with those two, he needs to give them a bit more freedom. And I think also Jantjies thrives when he's got an inside centre that knows him well. I think Jan Surftain has been sublime. I personally would like to see the outside tour potentially bringing a line centre inside, bringing Jan Surftain outside, and getting a sort of combination of the first receiver, you come off your first 2 receivers, all know each other quite well. And I think then you'll start seeing the sort of performances that we saw the Lions which warranted these two being picked. Otherwise, I think you might as well go to Pollard, somebody, although firstly he needs to be more match fit. I don't know why he was in the squad to begin with. Not because the talent isn't there, but just because he hasn't had the game time. But you can't pick somebody who's got obviously something and then ask him to give something completely different. If you're going to ask for tactical game, you can't ask young kids to play that role.
Yeah.
Can I ask though, do you think that Cronje was under instruction from Alistair Coetzee to kick? Because it sounded as if Coetzee wanted specifically the opposite, even though he did say it's important to be able to improvise when you're out there.
It was all around very strange, and I think nobody could quite understand why he was kicking. I mean, the fans were starting to boo it at one stage. The options didn't really make sense. You weren't gaining things. So I don't know why he was doing. I don't know if there was miscommunication there, but I don't know. It was uncharacteristic of him. He usually makes very good decisions on the field. That's why he preferred over some of our scrums. Because mine might be the quickest, mine might be the best delivery, but tactically he's normally very good. And so it was very strange to see him kicking so much possession away. Whether it was him or Coetzee, we're not quite sure. But I think obviously that needs to be looked at why that sort of situation was happening.
At the same time, that could just be chalked up to nerves, really. I mean, I've been involved in high-tier games from my perspective. I know when you get up there and there's a lot more pressure on your shoulders, generally you tend to make some stupid decisions. And when you stuff up once, you're going to stuff up again just because you don't have that confidence anymore.
No, look, we can't, and especially it was his first time ever playing All Blacks, and so it's a bit harsh to say he had a bad game dropped when he's playing against the best team in the last 2 decades for the first time. For me, he's the obvious candidate for the number 9 on the India tour, and I think you can't really disregard him after the one game, because one thing, I mean, even on the game, the likes of his defence, of what he offers there, something makes up there, but I think it's put down to a bad game. But for me, at the moment, there's no better scrum half in the country.
Absolutely, yeah. Alright, let's discuss the All Blacks' performance. Obviously, they came into that Newlands test without much to play for, having already wrapped up the Rugby Championship. And it did seem as though, in the early exchanges, that they sort of seemed to underestimate the Boks in a way. Obviously, Nehemel the Sculler threw that audacious behind-the-back pass early on in the test match. Dan, you sort of already touched on it, but are we perhaps getting a bit too carried away with that Springbok performance, considering the All Blacks really didn't have that much to play for?
Well, to be honest, if you look back at history, this lashback you get after one thrashing is actually very common. I mean, let's go all the way back to 2014 when we played Wales. We won 38-5 in the first game, 31-30 in the second test. So this generally happens a lot, but I do feel that the All Blacks were underestimating us. They did have pride to play for, and I mean, they didn't lose any. We gained a lot, but when we didn't get one at the end of the day. In 10 years' time, they're not going to say, remember the day the Springboks almost beat the All Blacks. They're going to say, remember the day yet again the All Blacks won.
Yeah.
So we have to work hard to win and not just almost win.
Yeah. Well, South Africa finished the Rugby Championship in third, behind New Zealand and Australia, and have since dropped to fifth on the World Rugby rankings. Stephen, considering where the Springboks have come, how far they've come since last year, and the improvement we've seen, do you think that Alistair Coetzee is the right man to take this Boks side to the next World Cup?
I don't think so, to be honest. I think the end of year tour will show. If he has the same tour he has last year, there's no ways we can then, in January, February, put our confidence in something and say, you can take us to the next World Cup and actually hope to contend. What we've seen, I think, this year is the fact that we beat a weakened French team. We beat Argentina, who is a shadow of the team we saw in the World Cup 2 years ago. Draw 2 against Australia, lose heavily against New Zealand, and then have a decent game where we sort of just missed out. I think this year there have been a lot of improvements. I mean, the fact that we're seeing a 1-3-3-1 system, we're actually seeing a formation and a structure to the game, which is very good to see. But I think the fact that he still doesn't quite, I mean, the fact that we had, I think, 3 games, since Whiteley's been out, we haven't placed an 8th man, and an out-and-out 8th man in that position the entire championship speaks to a system where I think you struggle to get behind a coach who sometimes you don't have confidence even he knows what he's doing.
Just really bringing in the likes of Raymond Rule for 3 days or something and just taking him out.
Exactly, and sticking to Raymond Rule after that game and everything, saying, no, I'm fully with them, then dropping him out of the squad, bringing him back for 2 days. So for me, it just sparks a man-about plan. You know, most coaches, even if it's going badly, they say, it's fine, trust the system, it will get there. For me, he chops and changes a bit too much, and he sticks to his current players where you don't understand what, I mean, the likes of John Luke still not getting a start for the Boks when he plays so many games. For me, I just don't think, it doesn't seem that he has a long-term plan or a short-term plan or something he's building up. He's pretty much taking it sort of game by game, and that's how to go. Yeah. And I think it could be a situation where, I think a lot behind the scenes, a lot of coaching staff, I think there are a lot of different people that are suddenly weighing with their opinions, which could be a problem, but I think he was never the right man for the job. And I think we're starting to see it here, and I think we need to be very, very careful whether we're just going to say, well, you know what, we'll let them be, or if we're actually going to be productive about it, make changes, and try and get us up to standard by the World Cup, which is in just under 2 years' time.
Yeah, interesting. Well, Springboks next play Ireland and Dublin on the 11th of November to kick off their year-end tour. Guys, just before we wrap up, a quick touch, Leon, just touch quickly on the Currie Cup. It has been one of the most competitive seasons in a very long time, which is very encouraging signs, I suppose, especially considering many of the high scores in the round-robin games and how teams have really looked to attack, which has been encouraging. On the other hand, there seems to have been a sort of a lack of emphasis shown on defence. Is that something maybe to look at, keep in mind, going to next year's Super Rugby tournament?
Yeah, definitely. I think beyond Super Rugby, I think it's a problem that South African rugby as a whole needs to look at.
Trying to catch up with the All Blacks.
Yeah, Alistair Coetzee is in communication with these Currie Cup coaches, I gather. Certainly, it seems they do take instructions from Saru. I think perhaps they need to get together and sort that out. It's not really a controversial issue. I mean, it's in the best interests of all of those sides. I must say, though, the one exception has been the Sharks. They conceded 47 points in that first game, but since then they've been rock solid. And you know, if you look at the stats, the Sharks haven't been nearly the best team on attack, but they've dominated the Currie Cup, and I think it's their defensive record very much that's done it for them. And the other teams need to take a leaf out of that book. But at the same time, I am pleased to see some positive rugby in the Currie Cup. It's brilliant for spectators, and if that's going to be bringing people into the Currie Cup games, that can only be good for South African rugby.
Absolutely. Oh, guys, thanks again for the discussion. Can't wait for that end of your tour. Thanks for tuning in again at Grocott Sport TV's Routers Block. We'll see you next week. Cheers.